Luna and the Great Star Search. Part 1. The Diamond Dust Gown. In the beginning, which was also the middle and, for all she knew, the end, Luna's existence was one of perfect, shimmering order. She was not merely a rock, condemned to a silent, looping journey through the void. She was a curator, a guardian, a gentle conductor of the grandest orchestra in the cosmos. Her light, a soft and pearlescent luminescence, was not borrowed but earned, a mother of pearl glow that she polished each day in the quiet moments before her ascent. Her domain was the night, a vast and endless ballroom whose floor was the sleeping world and whose ceiling was the infinite. And upon the ceiling she wore her masterpiece, a gown of the deepest, most luxurious velvet, a fabric spun from the very essence of darkness. But it was not the gown itself that was her pride. It was the embroidery, her stars. They were not cold, distant fusion reactors, as the more cynical elements of the universe might suggest. To Luna, they were her children, her companions, her thousand giggling sprites of light. They were her diamond dust, scattered and stitched into the fabric of her nightly rain. Each evening, as she rose over the horizon, she would begin to hum. It was a low, cosmic tune, a melody of gravity and grace, and as the first notes resonated through the emptiness, they would begin to answer. One by one, then in clusters, then in a great, silent explosion of brilliance, they would awaken. They winked and shimmered, not randomly, but with purpose. They were responsive, alive. They would listen to her humming and arrange themselves into their nightly patterns, the familiar and beloved shapes the sleeping world knew as constellations. To Luna, they were family portraits. There was the Great Bear, a grumpy but lovable uncle. Orion, the boastful cousin, always showing off his belt. The Pleiades, a cluster of 7 whispering sisters who shared all the best gossip. Her relationship with them was intimate and meticulous. She knew each one by the quality of its twinkle, the pitch of its silent laughter. She would drift among them, her silvery light caressing their edges, making sure they were comfortable. She would adjust a star that had strayed too far from its celestial family, nudging it gently back into place with a whisper of gravitational pull. She would soothe the fiery tempers of the red giants and encourage the shy blue dwarfs to shine a little brighter. Her absolute favorite, her secret treasure, was a tiny, impossibly bright star tucked away near the silver hem of her own glowing sphere. She called her Scintilla. Scintilla was particularly ticklish. Whenever Luna's light passed over her, she would fizz and spin, letting out a burst of light that felt to Luna like a child's delighted shriek. This was their private game, a nightly ritual of affection that anchored Luna's soul. This was her purpose, to wear her gown of living diamonds, to conduct the symphony of starlight, and to feel the ticklish joy of Scintilla's greeting. The universe was in harmony. Her gown was perfectly stitched and her heart was full. She knew nothing else, and she desired nothing more. The night was hers, the stars were hers, and all was well. Part 2. The Unstitched Darkness. The moment of her rising came, as it always did, with a gentle, internal chime that signaled the sun's retreat. Luna turned, preparing to ascend, anticipating the familiar, comforting weight of her star-dusted gown, the gentle, collective hum of her children waking to her presence. Instead, there was nothing. Not a quiet nothing. Not a peaceful nothing. It was a profound, suffocating, and absolute nothing. The sky was not a velvet canvas awaiting its jewels. It was a hole, a void, a terrifying, flawless, and infinite blackness that pressed in on her from all sides. The usual gentle tinkling that accompanied her rise, a sound so subtle she only noticed it by its absence, was replaced by a silence so complete it was a physical force. It was a deafening silence that roared in her non-existent ears and vibrated through her very core. Her first thought was that her eyes, her ancient silver senses, were deceiving her. She blinked, a slow, cosmic closing and opening of her perception. The view remained the same, an unblemished, unholy darkness. She spun on her axis, a slow, graceful pirouette that became more frantic with each degree of rotation. Perhaps they were just behind her. Perhaps they were playing a new game. But the blackness was relentless. It was everywhere. The familiar pinpricks of light, the comforting anchor points of her existence were gone. It was as if a divine seamstress had taken a pair of cosmic shears and unstitched every last diamond from her gown, leaving only the dark, raw fabric behind. The sky felt unraveled. Her purpose felt erased. A cold dread, something she had never experienced before, began to spread through her. It started in her cratered heart and radiated outwards. A chilling sensation like a cold nebula forming where warmth and light should be. This was more than loss. This was amputation. The stars were not just her companions. They were a part of her. They were the punctuation to her sentence, the light in her silver eyes. Without them, she wasn't Luna, guardian of the night. She was just a rock. A barren, lonely, and pointless rock adrift in a meaningless void. Her voice, when she finally found it, was a trembling whisper of light. Scintilla? She called out for her favorite, for the tiny, ticklish point of joy at her hem. She focused all her energy, all her hope, on that one spot in the void where Scintilla was supposed to be. She waited for the familiar, fizzy burst of light, the happy, winking reply. The silence that answered was the cruelest blow of all. It was absolute, final. It was the confirmation of her deepest, most instantaneous fear. They were gone. All of them. And that is when the quiet, cold dread finally broke her composure. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic washed over her. A tidal wave of fear so immense it threatened to extinguish her own soft light. The unstitched darkness was no longer just around her. It was inside her. Part 3. Counsel with the Grumbling Deep. Desperate, her light trembling and flickering like a dying candle, Luna abandoned her post at the zenith. An empty sky was a dereliction of duty she could not bear. She had to do something. She had to ask someone. With a frantic lurch, she descended, her silver glow casting a nervous, shimmering path across the world below as she headed for the first and oldest consciousness she could think of, the sea. She hovered just above the churning, restless surface, the salty spray misting her silver face. The sea, who called himself Oceanus, was an ancient, dramatic, and profoundly melancholic being. He did not speak so much as he rumbled, his voice a deep, resonant groan that was the sound of a billion waves crashing on a billion shores at once. He was always sighing, always lamenting, always caught in the grand opera of his own existence. Oceanus. Luna's voice was sharp, concise, stripped of all its usual gentleness by her panic. Oceanus, I need your help. The great watery expanse stirred. A massive swell rose up to meet her, its crest foaming like a sorrowful beard. The voice of the deep sighed, a sound that carried the weight of millennia. The pale wanderer, Oceanus rumbled, his tone dripping with theatrical woe. You grace my tormented surface. To what do I owe this interruption of my eternal brooding? My stars, Luna cried, forgoing all pleasantries. Have you seen my stars? They are gone. The sky is empty. Oceanus seemed to consider this. Another great sighing wave rolled across his surface. He was a being of immense empathy, but it was an empathy filtered entirely through the lens of his own magnificent sorrow. He could only understand another's pain by relating it back to his own grander tragedies. Loss, you say? He groaned. Ah, loss. I know of loss, little moon. I know of it better than any. Do you see this churning heart of mine? It is a treasury of things lost. He paused for dramatic effect. I have swallowed fleets of proud ships, their sails like captured clouds, now sleeping in my salt-stung belly. I have cradled lovers' whispered secrets, tossed from lonely cliffs, their echoes now tangled in my kelp forests. I have claimed pearls from a pirate's chest, each one a frozen tear, now scattered upon my floor where no light may find them, your stars. They are but a handful of sparks compared to the empires of memory that slumber in my inky heart. Luna floated, stunned by the sheer, unhelpful poetry of it all. But have you seen them? She pressed, her voice cracking. Tonight, did they fall? Did you catch them? Oceanus let out a particularly deep and gurgling sigh. My gaze, sweet Luna, is ever downward. I am consumed by the contemplation of my own depths, by the weight of all I hold. I look into the abyss of my own soul, not up at the fleeting tapestry of the sky. I have seen nothing but the reflection of my own endless sorrow. I feel your pain, a tiny drop in the ocean of my own. But no, I have not seen your little lights. With a final grumbling splash, the great swell receded, and Oceanus returned to his eternal, self-absorbed brooding. Luna was left hovering in the damp, salty air, no closer to an answer and now burdened with the borrowed melancholy of the sea. Her first attempt at finding help had failed, drowned in a sea of tragic, useless prose. She had sought a witness and found only a fellow mourner, one who insisted his grief was far more profound than her own. Part 4. The stone-still silence of the summits. Frustrated by the sea's dramatic wallowing and chilled by his damp sorrow, Luna turned her gaze upward. If the deep could not help, perhaps the high could. She fled the coast, her silvery light a frantic streak across the sleeping land, until she reached the jagged spine of the world, the great mountain ranges. Here dwelled a consciousness entirely different from the seas. They were a council of ancient, stoic elders, their faces carved from granite and lichen, their thoughts moving at a geological pace. They did not have individual names. They were known collectively as the Summits, or sometimes the Stone Fathers. They had been there when the world was molten, and they planned to be there when it was dust. Luna positioned herself above their highest snow-dusted peak, her light casting long, eerie shadows down their stony flanks. She took a moment to compose herself, sensing that the frantic approach that had failed with Oceanus would be even less effective here. Venerable Summits, she began, her voice imbued with a respect she hoped would be well received. I come to you in a time of great crisis. My stars have vanished. The night is bare. I implore you, from your great height, did you see where they went? There was a silence. It was not the empty, terrifying silence of the starless void, nor the dramatic, waiting silence of the sea. This was a silence of profound, immeasurable weight. It was the silence of stone thinking. It stretched for what felt to Luna like an hour. A small glacier audibly crept a few inches down a valley. A loose pebble, dislodged a century ago, finally completed its fall. At long last, a voice answered. It was not a rumble, but a grinding, a slow scraping of tectonic plates forming a word. It came from the tallest peak. A night ... The mountain said, his voice like rock slides and ancient ice, ... is a brief thing. Another peak, broader and more weathered, stirred. Have seen ... empires ... rise ... and fall ... like frost on our shoulders. A third sharper peak added, the sky ... changes, the rock ... endures. Luna felt a new kind of despair blossom within her. It was the despair of being utterly misunderstood. They were not being unkind. They were offering her their deepest, most fundamental wisdom, the wisdom of geological time. They were trying to soothe her with perspective, but their perspective was so vast it rendered her crisis meaningless. But it's not brief for me, she pleaded. It is my everything. My entire existence happens in a single night. I need to find them now. The first mountain seemed to ponder this for another long minute. Patience, it grated. All things. Find their level. What is lost is eventually ... weathered down and becomes part of the whole. Another of the Stone Fathers offered a gentle but horrifying suggestion. Perhaps, he rasped, his voice the sound of wind whistling through a high pass. Your stars have eroded. Eroded. The word struck Luna with the force of a meteor. They saw her living, laughing children as mere pebbles of light, subject to the same slow, grinding decay as their own granite forms. They could not comprehend her urgency, her panic, her love. Their wisdom, while immense and true on its own terms, was too large, too slow, too cold to be of any use. It was like trying to patch a torn dress with a continent. She had come to the mountains seeking a vantage point, a higher perspective. She had received one, but it was a perspective so high it saw her problem as a speck of dust, a fleeting moment in an endless expanse of time. Defeated by a wisdom too grand to be practical, Luna fled the silent, stoic peaks, her own light feeling smaller and more insignificant than ever before. Part 5. A glaring conversation. She was at her lowest point. The deep had offered only drama, and the high had offered only detachment. Her hope was a dwindling ember in the vast, cold furnace of her panic. There was only one other being powerful enough to possibly know anything, one entity whose gaze swept the entire cosmos. It was a terrifying prospect, a last resort she had been avoiding, for his very nature was anathema to hers. She had to confront the sun. She raced to the edge of the world, to that delicate, bleeding seam where night was forced to give way to day. The horizon was just beginning to blush with the faintest hints of pink and orange. It was a painful place for her to be. His ambient energy made her feel faint, his encroaching light a physical assault on her gentle, silvery essence. And then he rose. Sol, the sun, did not simply appear. He made an entrance. He burst over the horizon in a theatrical explosion of golden fire, a magnificent, proud, and blindingly arrogant celebrity arriving on the red carpet of dawn. His voice when he spoke was not a rumble or a grind. It was a booming clarion call that sounded like 1,000 cymbals clashing at once. Behold, he roared to no one in particular, I have arrived. Let the world awaken and bask in my unparalleled glory. He was so consumed with his own brilliant arrival that he didn't notice her at first, a pale, trembling ghost at the edge of his stage. Sol, Luna called, her voice thin and reedy in the face of his magnificent noise. He stopped his flaring, his attention snagged. He squinted, his golden gaze focusing on her. Ah, the pale usher of the darkness, he said, his tone laced with annoyance. Still lingering? The show is over. My show is beginning. Be gone with you. Your melancholy glow dampens my overture. They are gone, Sol, Luna cried, desperation overriding her fear of him. My stars. Did you take them? Did you burn them away in your jealousy? Sol actually recoiled, not in guilt, but in theatrical offense. Then he laughed. It was a terrible sound, a cascade of brilliant, searing noise that made Luna flinch. Take them? He boomed, flaring his corona in a gesture of pure, unadulterated ego. My dear, dreary satellite, why on earth would I want your cold little embers? Your dusty secondhand sparkles, when I have this? He pulsed with golden light, a wave of heat washing over Luna. I am the source, I am the fire. Your stars are but the smoke from my magnificent blaze. I have no need for them. He was so proud, so arrogant, so utterly wrapped up in himself. But as he ranted, as he paced the stage of the horizon complaining about the indignity of her accusation, he inadvertently gave her everything. Besides, he continued, his tone shifting to one of bitter complaint, I have had far greater annoyances to deal with lately. My artistry has been compromised. My sunrises, which should be crisp, clear masterpieces of crimson and gold, have been smudged. My sunsets, my grand finales, have been muffled. All because of those those insufferably thick, gray, fluffy buffoons. Luna froze. Fluffy buffoons? They drift about with no sense of composition. Sol spat, his light flaring with indignation. No respect for dramatic lighting. They just hang there, these great lumpy pillows of vapor, blocking my best angles and ruining my perfect gradients. He gestured angrily at the upper atmosphere, the clouds. They have no respect for a true artist. They are pests, nothing more. He dismissed them with a final angry wave of his hand, turning back to the business of his grand entrance. He was completely unaware that in his self-absorbed tirade, in his complaint about his own trivial problems, he had handed her the key to the entire universe. The clouds. A flash of insight, more brilliant than Sol himself, exploded in Luna's mind. She had seen them, of course, but had dismissed them as she always did, as aimless, transient vapor, as unimportant as fog. But Sol's angry description, insufferably thick, gray, fluffy, painted a different picture. They had seen her night after night in her serene, predictable, meticulous routine. They had seen her gentle, loving care. And in their bright, playful hearts, they had conspired to give her the most wonderful surprise they could imagine. They had wanted to see her look for them. They had wanted the joy of being found. Their collective light was not one of distress, but of pure, unadulterated, childish fun. Luna stared, her mind reeling. She had crossed the cosmos in a state of abject terror. She had interrogated the morose sea, the stoic mountains, and the arrogant sun. She had imagined every possible horror, theft, destruction, decay. Her fear had built a narrative of malice and loss, a universe that had turned hostile and empty. But the universe wasn't hostile, it wasn't empty. It was just playing a game she hadn't known was afoot. The problem was never in the sky. It was in her perception. The reality was not a catastrophe. It was an act of love. Part 7. The sky re-illuminated. The moment Scintilla saw that she had been well and truly found, she could contain herself no longer. She let out a silent, brilliant shriek of pure delight, a pulse of light that acted as a signal. In an instant, the game was over. The stars burst from behind their cloudy curtain, not one by one, but all at once, in a single glorious supernova of laughter. He sky, which moments before had been a terrifying void, and then a place of anxious mystery, was suddenly filled with a chaotic, dazzling, and more brilliant light than Luna had ever seen before. It was not the orderly, stately light of their usual constellations. It was a riot of joy, a swirling, dancing, ecstatic explosion of pure being. They swirled around her, a maelstrom of happy light. They zipped and zagged, leaving trails of silver and gold across the velvet black. They nudged her and tickled her with their sharp, bright edges, apologizing for frightening her, but also bubbling with an irrepressible pride at their own cleverness. They had managed to hide the entire night sky. They communicated in flashes and pulses, the best game ever. Luna's relief was a physical thing, a great, silver wave that washed through her core, cleansing her of all the fear, the frustration, the cold dread of the long, empty night, the panic that had gripped her, the sorrow she had felt. It all dissolved in the face of this overwhelming, innocent joy. And then she began to laugh. It started as a small tremor in her center, but it grew quickly. A deep, silvery, resonant laugh bubbled up from her cratered heart and spilled out into the cosmos. It was a sound she hadn't known she could make, a sound of pure, unburdened delight. It was the laugh of a mother who, after a moment of terror, thinking her child is lost in the market, finds him hiding behind a coat rack, beaming with pride at his own cleverness. She didn't scold them. She didn't lecture them about the worry they had caused. In that moment of reunion, she understood completely. Their prank was not born of malice, but of a deep and abiding love, a desire to break the routine and share a moment of pure, unexpected joy with her. She opened her gravitational arms and pulled them into a great, cosmic embrace. Her own light, fueled by the immense relief and sudden happiness, shone brighter than it ever had. It was no longer just the cool, reflected light of the distant sun. It was something more. It was a light warmed from within, kindled by the memory of her own laughter and the profound knowledge that her children were safe and that they loved her enough to play a trick on her. From that night on, Luna and her stars were different. Their nightly ritual was no longer just a stately, predictable affair. There was a new spark in it, a shared secret. The constellations she arranged now seemed to have an extra twinkle, a hint of mischief in their alignment. And sometimes, on the clearest of nights, a tiny star near her silver hem would suddenly vanish, only to reappear a moment later behind a passing wisp of cloud, winking furiously. And Luna, guardian of the night, would feel a tremor of that deep, silvery laugh once more. She had learned that the universe was far more playful than she had ever imagined, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are not lost at all, but are merely waiting, with a giggle, to be rediscovered with joyful eyes.